Concubines in Ancient China and Egypt, a comprehensive study. Concubinage was a significant social institution in both ancient China and Egypt, reflecting cultural, political, and social dynamics. Concubines were women who cohabited with men of high status, often emperors or pharaohs, in a subordinate role to official wives, primarily to bear children and enhance the man's prestige. This video explores the roles, selection processes, daily lives, and punishments of concubines in these two ancient civilizations, as well as intriguing historical theories such as the mathematical scheduling of an emperor's interactions with 121 women in 2 weeks, the rare phenomenon of male concubines in China, the practice of foot binding known as the Golden Lotus, and the perspectives of ancient philosophers on concubinage. By comparing and contrasting these practices, we aim to illuminate the lives of concubines and their impact on state affairs, drawing on historical evidence and critically examining lesser-known details. Stay with us. Perhaps the facts in this video may change your life forever. Concubines in Ancient China and Egypt, an overview. In ancient China, concubinage was a deeply entrenched institution, particularly within the imperial court, where emperors maintained large harems to symbolize power and ensure the production of heirs. Unlike polygamy, which was illegal and socially disreputable, concubinage was an accepted practice where men, especially of high status, could have multiple concubines alongside one legal wife. Concubines, known as qi or pinfei imperial consorts, held a lower status than the wife, and their children were often considered illegitimate, though they could gain prominence under certain conditions, such as the death of the wife or the birth of a male heir. The imperial harem, often housed in the Forbidden City during the Ming and Qing dynasties, could contain hundreds or even thousands of women, with some emperors, like Hong Fu, reportedly keeping up to 10,000 concubines. The primary roles of concubines were to produce children and satisfy the emperor's sexual desires, but their lives were heavily restricted. They are often confined to inner palaces, guarded by eunuchs to ensure exclusivity for the emperor, and faced severe punishments for infidelity, including death. The system was highly hierarchical, with ranks ranging from the empress to lower-tier concubines like noble ladies and second-class attendants, each with specific privileges and responsibilities. Ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, concubinage was also prevalent, particularly among pharaohs and elite men. While most Egyptians were monogamous, pharaohs maintained multiple wives and concubines to form diplomatic alliances and produce heirs. Concubines, often slaves or women of lower social status, were secondary to the great royal wife who held the highest rank. Unlike in China, Egyptian concubines could be skilled individuals such as weavers, as evidenced by a request from Pharaoh Amenhotep III for beautiful concubines skilled in specific crafts valued at 40 silver each. Egyptian concubines served similar purposes to their Chinese counterparts, producing children and enhancing prestige, but their social status and roles were less formalized. They often lived in the royal palace or harem, a separate quarter for women and children, and their children could occasionally arise to prominence, though they typically lacked the inheritance rights of the great royal wife's offspring. The practice was less hierarchical than China, with fewer documented ranks, and concubines could sometimes gain influence through their children or personal talents. Mathematical theories for an emperor's interaction with 121 women in 2 weeks. A fascinating and lesser-known theory from ancient China involves the mathematical scheduling of an emperor's sexual interactions with his harem to maximize fertility and imperial favor. Historical records suggest that Chinese emperors, particularly during the Ming Dynasty, adhered to a philosophy that a robust sex life benefited the empire's prosperity. To this end, court secretaries and scribes developed a system to ensure the emperor engaged with a large number of concubines efficiently. The claim that an emperor could have sex with 121 women in 2 weeks, then repeat the cycle, reflects this structured approach. This theory likely stemmed from the belief that sexual activity during the full moon, when the yin energy was thought to be the strongest, enhanced conception. A possible schedule involved the emperor visiting multiple concubines per night, with the number 121 suggesting a highly organized rotation. For example, an emperor might engage with 8 to 9 women nightly over 14 days, 121 divided by 14, approximately 8.64. This could involve brief encounters, possibly facilitated by eunuchs who managed the harem schedule and ensured the women were prepared. The system prioritized high-ranking concubines and those deemed most fertile, with meticulous records kept to track interactions and potential heirs. While no direct evidence confirms the exact number of 121, the concept aligns with the documented emphasis on a vibrant imperial sex life to symbolize and sustain imperial power. No equivalent mathematical theory exists in the Egyptian records, likely due to less rigid harem structures and fewer surviving documents detailing such practices. However, the large number of concubines in a pharaoh's harem suggests a similar intent to maximize offspring, though without the systematic approach seen in China. Life of male concubines in ancient China. The concept of male concubines in ancient China is rare and not well documented, as concubinage was predominantly a female institution. However, the term concubines in Roman context referred to young male slaves chosen as sexual partners, and similar practices may have existed in China, although sparingly. Historical records do not explicitly describe concubine males in the Chinese imperial court, but there are hints of analogous roles among palace eunuchs, who were castrated men serving the emperor and his harem. Eunuchs occasionally held intimate, non-sexual roles of companionship, wielding significant influence due to their proximity to the emperor. For example, during the Ming Dynasty, eunuchs like Wei Zongtian gained immense power, acting as confidants and advisors, though not explicitly as concubines. Unlike female concubines, male companions were not tasked with producing heirs, and roles were more administrative or personal. The lack of widespread evidence suggests male concubinage was not a standard practice, overshadowed by the extensive female harem system. In Egypt, male concubines were similarly rare, with no clear records indicating their presence in pharaohs' harems, which focused on female concubines for reproductive purposes.
Selection process of concubines in ancient China. Ancient China. The selection of concubines in ancient China, particularly during the Ming and Qing dynasties, was a rigorous and meticulous process designed to ensure the emperor received the most suitable women. Candidates, typically aged 13 to 16, underwent multiple stages of evaluation. 1. Initial screening. Eunuchs scouted thousands of young women nationwide, often from poor or noble families, depending on the dynasty. In the Ming dynasty, no household was exempt, while the Qing dynasty limited selection to Manchu and Mongol families of the 8 banners. Approximately 5,000 girls were initially shortlisted. 2. Physical examination. On the first day, candidates were inspected for physical attributes, eliminating those deemed too tall, short, fat, or thin. The second day focused on voice, diction, and mannerisms, reducing the pool further. The third day involved detailed examinations of lips, feet, arms, breasts, and perceived sexuality, with another 1,000 eliminated. 3. Medical and behavioral tests. A thorough medical examination on the 4th day screened for diseases and disabilities, narrowing the group to 300. These finalists were judged on knowledge, temperament, and character, and trained in courtly behavior, arts, and etiquette. They served the emperor's mother as maids, undergoing further scrutiny for habits like snoring or sleepwalking. 4. Final selection. The emperor or his mother selected the final concubines, who were ranked and integrated into the harem. Only a few gained the emperor's attention, while others lived in obscurity. This process ensured concubines were physically and intellectually suitable, reflecting the emperor's prestige and the empire's stability. Ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, the selection of concubines was less formalized, but still deliberate. Concubines were often slaves, prisoners of war, or daughters of noble families offered as diplomatic gifts. For example, Amenhotep III requested 40 skilled concubines from the Prince of Gezer, indicating a focus on talent and beauty. Unlike the rigid Chinese system, Egyptian selection criteria varied by pharaoh, with an emphasis on physical attractiveness, skills like weaving or dancing, and political alliances. Concubines were typically chosen by the pharaoh or his advisors, and their social status was lower than that of the great royal wife. The process lacked the structured hierarchy of China, reflecting Egypt's more flexible social structure. However, concubines with talent or beauty could gain favor, occasionally influencing court dynamics but with limited structural power. Role of concubines in state affairs. Ancient China. While concubines were primarily tasked with producing heirs, some wielded significant influence in state affairs, particularly in the imperial court. Notable examples include Empress Dowager Cixi. Originally a concubine to the Xinfang Emperor, Cixi rose to power after bearing his only surviving son, the Tangji Emperor. She became the de facto ruler of the Qing dynasty for 47 years, controlling state affairs through her son and nephew, demonstrating the potential for concubines to transcend their roles. Consort Zhen. A favorite of the Guangzhou Emperor, Zhen influenced his reformist policies, leading to her punishment by the Empress Dowager Cixi, who ordered her death during the Boxer Rebellion. Wu Zetian, starting as a concubine to Emperor Taizong, Wu Zetian became empress and later the only female emperor, founding the Zhou dynasty. Her political acumen reshaped Tang dynasty governance. These women leveraged their proximity to the emperor to influence policy, often facing criticism from male officials who viewed their power as a threat. The inner court's isolation allowed concubines to act as advisors or manipulators, shaping imperial decisions. Ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, concubines had less documented influence on state affairs compared to China, but their roles were not insignificant. The production of royal heirs could elevate a concubine's status, and some gained favor through personal talents or relationships with the pharaoh. For example, a concubine's son could become pharaoh, as seen in cases like Thutmose I, believed to be the son of a concubine. Concubines often served as diplomatic tools, with foreign princesses or daughters of allies entering the harem to strengthen alliances. Their influence was typically indirect, through their children or personal relationships, rather than formal political roles. The lack of a rigid harem hierarchy limited their structural power compared to Chinese concubines. Daily life and care of concubines. Ancient China. The daily life of concubines in the Forbidden City was a mix of luxury and confinement. Their primary role was to be available for the emperor, but many spent their lives in isolation, waiting for rare visits. Key aspects include daily activities. Concubines engaged in activities like sewing, painting, reading, writing, dancing, and socializing within the inner court. They were trained in courtly arts to remain appealing. Their movements were restricted, and contact with the outside world was forbidden, enforced by eunuchs. Preparation for the emperor. Before an emperor's visit, concubines underwent rigorous preparation, including bathing and medical examinations, to ensure health and fertility. They were often carried to the emperor's chambers, especially during the Ming dynasty, when foot-binding limited mobility. Care and living conditions. Concubines lived in designated palaces, with higher-ranking women enjoying private residences and attendants. Lower-ranking concubines shared quarters. They received clothing, food, and medical care according to their rank, with bright yellow reserved for the empress and golden yellow for higher-ranking concubines.
Loneliness and competition. Despite luxurious surroundings, concubines faced intense loneliness and rivalry. The hierarchical system fostered jealousy and intrigue, with poisonings and assassinations not uncommon. Ancient Egypt. Egyptian concubines lived in royal harems, which were less structured than Chinese harems, but still restrictive. Their daily activities included performing tasks like weaving, dancing, or singing, reflecting their skills. They also cared for children and participated in palace life, with more freedom than Chinese concubines, but still under supervision. Preparation for the pharaoh. Concubines were prepared for the pharaoh with grooming and possibly ritualistic practices, although specific details are scarce. Their roles were less rigidly scheduled in China, reflecting Egypt's more flexible social structure. Social dynamics. Competition existed, but was less intense than China due to fewer hierarchical constraints. Concubines could form alliances or rivalries, particularly over the pharaoh's favor or their children's status. The Golden Lotus shape. Foot binding in ancient China. The Golden Lotus refers to the practice of foot binding in ancient China, which created small, arched feet, considered a symbol of beauty and status. Originating during the Sung dynasty, 960 to 1279, and prevalent in the Ming and Qing dynasties, foot binding involved tightly wrapping young girls' feet to prevent growth, resulting in feet as small as 3 to 4 inches, resembling a lotus bud.
Purpose and significance. Aesthetic and social status. Small feet were eroticized and signified high social status, as bound feet prevented women from manual labor, indicating wealth. The term Golden Lotus romanticized this painful practice, which was particularly common among concubines to enhance their appeal to the emperor. Impact on concubines. Foot binding restricted mobility, reinforcing concubines' confinement within the palace. They were often carried to the emperor's chambers, emphasizing their dependence and ornamental role. The practice was a mark of beauty, but also a form of control, limiting escape or independence. Cultural context. Foot binding was exclusive to China and not practiced in Egypt, where physical mobility was less restricted. The Golden Lotus was a unique cultural phenomenon, reflecting Chinese ideals of femininity and imperial power dynamics. Punishment of concubines for mistakes. Ancient China. Punishments for concubines in ancient China were severe, reflecting their precarious status and the emperor's absolute authority. Common infractions included infidelity, failure to please the emperor, or involvement in palace intrigue. Punishments included execution, infidelity or plotting against the emperor, as in the Rinyin plot against the Jiajing emperor in 1542, resulted in execution by methods like slow slicing or death by 1,000 cuts. The 16 women involved in the plot were executed, along with their families. Demotion. Failure to bear children or loss of favor could lead to demotion to lower ranks, reducing privileges and status. House arrest or exile. Concubines like Consort Zhen faced house arrest for political interference, and some were exiled or gifted to other rulers, replacing one form of captivity with another. Suicide. Emperors or empresses sometimes forced concubines to commit suicide, as seen with Consort Zhen, who was ordered to drown herself in a well by Empress Dowager Cixi in 1900. Ancient Egypt. Punishments in ancient Egypt are less documented, but were similarly harsh. Concubines faced execution or banishment. Infidelity or treason could lead to execution or banishment from the harem, stripping women of royal protection. Loss of favor. Failure to please the pharaoh or produce heirs could result in neglect, reducing a concubine's status and resources. Physical punishment. While specific records are scarce, physical punishment for minor infractions was likely, given the hierarchical nature of the palace. Egyptian punishments were less systematic than in China, reflecting the less rigid harem structure, but the pharaoh's authority ensured severe consequences for disobedience. Philosophical writings on concubines. Ancient China. Chinese philosophers, particularly Confucians, addressed concubinage within the context of social hierarchy and morality. Ban Zhao, 41 to circa 115 CE, a prominent female scholar, Ban Zhao wrote Nu Jie, Instructions for Women, emphasizing women's subservience to men and virtues of speech, behavior, work, and modesty. While not directly addressing concubines, her work reinforced the subordinate role of women, including concubines, in serving their husbands and maintaining family harmony. She acknowledged the practical necessity of concubines for producing heirs, but stressed their lower status compared to wives. Confucian principles. Confucian philosophy, influential across dynasties, viewed concubinage as a legitimate means to ensure family lineage, provided it adhered to hierarchical norms. Concubines were expected to serve the emperor and his wife without challenging the primary wife's authority. Lack of specific texts. No major philosophical texts explicitly focus on concubines, but the Confucian emphasis on male authority and family duty implicitly supported the institution. The Rights of Zhu outline rules allowing feudal lords up to 9 consorts, codifying concubinage within social structures. Ancient Egypt. Egyptian philosophical or religious texts rarely address concubines directly, as the culture focused more on divine kingship and cosmology than on social rules like concubinage. However, religious context, Egyptian priests and scribes who produced moral and religious texts likely viewed concubines as part of the pharaoh's divine role to maintain ma'at, or order and balance. The production of heirs by concubines supported the continuity of divine rule, aligning with religious ideals. Lack of philosophical discourse. Unlike China, Egypt did not have a philosophical tradition akin to Confucianism. Texts like the Book of the Dead or wisdom literature focus on morality and the afterlife, with little mention of concubines. Their role was practical rather than philosophically debated. Cultural acceptance. The absence of critical philosophical writings suggests concubinage was an accepted practice, justified by the pharaoh's divine status and need for heirs, without significant moral scrutiny. Shocking and less known information. While much about concubinage is well documented, certain details stand out as particularly striking or less commonly known. Ming Dynasty atrocities. The Yongle Emperor's execution of 2,800 concubines in 1421, following rumors of an affair, highlights the extreme cruelty faced by concubines. This mass execution, prompted by the emperor's humiliation over alleged impotence, is a chilling example of their vulnerability. The Judging Emperor's Red Lead. The Judging Emperor's quest for immortality involved collecting menstrual blood from young concubines, who were fed only mulberry leaves and rainwater to maintain purity. These women were subjected to starvation and beatings, leading to the 1542 Rinyin plot, where 16 concubines attempted to assassinate him. This gruesome practice is a lesser-known aspect of imperial excess. Consort Sen's photography. Consort Sen's fascination with photography in the late Qing dynasty, smuggling cameras into the forbidden space, provided rare visual records of concubine life. Her defiance of palace rules and subsequent murder by Cixi underscored the dangers of stepping beyond traditional roles. Egyptian diplomatic concubines. The use of concubines as diplomatic tools, such as Amenhotep III's request for 40 skilled concubines, reveals a pragmatic aspect of concubinage that is less emphasized in popular narratives, highlighting their economic and political value. Concubinage in ancient China and ancient Egypt was a complex institution shaped by cultural, political, and social factors.
In China, the highly structured harem system, exemplified by the mathematical scheduling of 121 women in 2 weeks, reflected imperial power and fertility goals, while in Egypt, a less rigid system focused on diplomacy and reproduction. Male concubines were rare in both cultures, with eunuchs in China serving analogous roles. The selection process was rigorous in China, involving multiple stages of physical and behavioral evaluation, while Egyptian selection was more flexible, but still strategic. Concubines played significant roles in state affairs, particularly in China, where figures like Wu Jidian and Cixi rose to power, though their influence was often criticized. Daily life was marked by luxury, confinement, and competition, with Chinese concubines facing greater restrictions due to practices like foot binding. The Golden Lotus symbolized beauty, but also control, which was unique to China. Punishments were severe, ranging from execution to demotion, reflecting the precarious status of concubines. Philosophers like Pan Zhao in China reinforced their subordinate roles, while Egyptian texts largely ignored the topic, accepting concubinage as part of divine kingship without significant moral scrutiny. Shocking practices such as mass executions and the use of menstrual blood revealed the darker side of concubinage, underscoring the challenges and dangers these women faced in both China and Egypt. Did this video add anything new to your knowledge? Click the like button and tell us in the comments which part of the video and which piece of information you liked and were curious about. If you aren't subscribed to Ebulos View channel, subscribe now as we delve deeper than others dare.